For TLDR News, this is your daily briefing for Tuesday the 31st of May 2022. Good afternoon. Today we'll be discussing some of the biggest stories, including the Israel-UAE trade deal and Canadian gun control. We'll also be answering today's big question: could Boris Johnson be ousted? As well as discussing the return to imperial units. But first, the news of more sanctions on Russia. EU leaders have finally agreed on a sixth set of sanctions against Russia. After weeks of wrangling, the EU 27 reached an agreement late last night that would see an embargo placed on Russian oil imports arriving to the bloc by sea, but as a temporary measure, not by pipeline. The ban would affect more than 2/3 of all imports of Russian oil, while minimising the impact of a complete shut-off on the likes of Hungary, who refused to agree to a complete ban on Russian oil. Poland and Germany have, separately, pledged to stop importing pipeline oil by the end of the year, which would boost coverage of the ban to 90% of imports. The 27 also agreed on cutting off Sberbank, Russia's largest bank, from the SWIFT payment network, and banned a further 3 state-owned broadcasters from the bloc. Israel and the United Arab Emirates have signed a historic free trade deal, the first such agreement between Israel and an Arab country. According to an Israeli government statement, it is expected to lead to 96% of trade between the two countries being given immediate or gradual tax exemption. The trade deal comes after just a year of talks and nearly 2 years after Israel and the UAE normalised diplomatic relations under the US-brokered Abraham Accords in 2020. It's estimated that Israel-UAE bilateral trade was worth around $675 million in the 10 months following the Abraham Accords, so a free market deal could see that increase rapidly. The UAE had been pursuing free trade agreements in a bid to build its status as an international business hub. It signed a deal with India in February and is in talks with countries including Indonesia and South Korea. There's more on the way, but be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to make the daily briefing part of your daily routine. Or just search for us on your podcast app to listen along. The Canadian government has introduced new legislation which would implement a national freeze on the sale of handguns, limit long gun magazine capacity, and more, in what Prime Minister Justin Trudeau described as some of the strongest gun control measures in over 40 years. Trudeau's announcement follows recent deadly mass shootings in the US states of Texas and New York, and rising gun violence within Canada, though considerably lower than in the United States. He said, "We need only look south of the border to know that if we do not take action firmly and rapidly, it gets worse and worse." There would be exceptions to the handgun freeze, including for elite sports shooters and security guards, and those already in possession of handguns would be allowed to keep them. Turning to the UK, where the government's flagship recruitment scheme for graduates is to be put on ice. The civil service fast stream, which actively recruits more than 1,000 graduates each year to become our future leaders, is to be paused for at least a year starting in 2023. The fast stream sees graduates with a lower second-class degree or better enter the civil service on an accelerated timetable, with specialisms on everything from data and economics to science and diplomacy. Many previous candidates on the scheme have already worked their way up to the position of permanent secretary, in effect heading up government departments. The pause comes amid a government pledge to get civil service job numbers back down to pre-pandemic, pre-Brexit levels, requiring a cut of up to 91,000 jobs, roughly equivalent to cutting 1 in 5 jobs. Moving to France now, and tech and gaming-related English words like pro-gamer, streamer, esports and cloud gaming face the axe from the French language as French officials continue their centuries-old battle to preserve the purity of the French language and push back against the increased use of Anglicisms. The French Academy, which dates back to the 17th century, is the ultimate authority of the French language and is tasked with publishing an official dictionary and guidance. Its 40 members hold office for life and are known as the Immortals. Yes, really, and they take things pretty seriously. A few months ago, they warned against the growing use of English phrases, calling it a degradation that must not be seen as inevitable. Yesterday's changes provide official French alternatives to the phrases mentioned earlier, and are binding on government workers. That's all we have time for on YouTube today, but if you want more, including answering today's big question, could Boris Johnson be ousted, and our discussion of imperial units, then watch the extended edition of the Daily Briefing over on Nebula. Nebula subscribers not only get everything you've already watched ad-free, but also an extended edition of the show every single day, available to watch on Nebula or stream on your podcast app of choice. So if you want to support the channel and get a more extensive daily briefing every day, you'll want to sign up. And there's good news. Our friends at CuriosityStream, the streaming service which offers some of the best documentaries, is offering a deal whereby you can get both platforms, CuriosityStream and Nebula, for less than $15 a year. That's all the best documentaries you could want on CuriosityStream, and then more TLDR on Nebula, including the extended briefing, other full exclusive TLDR videos, and it's always ad-free. Click the link below to get both services for less than $15 a year and support the channel.